Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, Trends in the Home Improvement Industry. I'm excited to have our esteemed panel joining us today, a collaboration of three key leaders in the home improvement industry, HIRI, Today's Homeowner, and TraQline. My name is Stacy Hughes and I'm the moderator for today's games. Before we begin, and while we wait for others to join, I'm just going to talk about a few rules of engagement. We are recording today's webinar. A link will be provided via email to all attendees, and we will also post the link on HIRI, TraQline, and Today's Homeowners websites. Because of the size of our webinar today, we are in listening mode. Please use the chat or question function to ask any questions. We will monitor those as we go along, but we'll allow time at the end of the session to answer any questions. If we don't get to the questions today, following our session, we will absolutely follow up via email. You may also forward any questions to specific panelists, and we'll make sure that each individual panelist gets those and responds to your question. Otherwise, you can feel free to email HIRI directly with any questions as they come up today. And finally, our session today will be very casual. The guys here know that we're going to have a series of questions in answer format that I will address to each of them individually. But because it is casual, please jump in if you feel like you have opportunities to share something as somebody else is speaking. Otherwise, yeah, just play along with our games today. So thank you all for being here. Let's begin by having our panelists provide a short introduction. First up, we have Danny Lipford, the face and legend of the Today's Homeowner show. Welcome, Danny. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to the industry?
Well, certainly can. I appreciate that, Stacey, and I appreciate this opportunity to be on this webinar. The numbers are very impressive to see the amount of people that are joining us today, and we look forward to it. I've been in business for a long time. I started my construction business 44 years ago. Lipford Construction is still in existence. I still own the business. I'm just not able to be involved in it very much. But over the years, it evolved to a premier residential remodeling business, and have done thousands and thousands of all kinds of remodeling projects. I still love it, even though I'm not able to be involved in it very much because of my media work. But it's still very, very good, and it's a wonderful part of it. I've been involved in the National Home Builders Association for all of these years and served on a number of capacities there over the years. And I started my television show actually 35 years ago on a local basis, and it went national in '98, so 25 short years ago. So celebrating our 25th year on national television right now, and 90% of the country, and a lot of streaming platforms. So things are still going good, and the appetite for practical, realistic home improvement information is stronger than it's ever been. A lot of people are trying to cut through all of the drama and things that you see a lot of times. There's enough drama in home improvement not to worry about that, and to keep it very practical. But I have Today's Homeowner television show, Today's Homeowner radio show, which is probably the largest home improvement radio show in the United States, with over 350 stations, and our tips library, which are the short features, over 500 stations. So real proud of that carriage. Also, my daughter has a fantastic show called Checking In with Chelsea. She won a couple Telly Awards and doing very, very well with that. And that's on checkinginwithchelsea.com. She's also my co-host of the television show, which people appreciate. Our little banter back and forth, and basically her picking on me all the time is what that involves. So we have a great opportunity there. But what I really like is our Today's Homeowner Hotline, where people can call all over the country anytime with any question or comment, or maybe a few things that have worked well for them in their house that they share with us, we can share with the Today's Homeowner community. But more than anything, that's like an ongoing focus group. So I know what people are thinking. I know what they're asking for. I know where the strongest interest lies. And many of that, of course, will be in seasonal, this time of the year, decks and outdoor living spaces, that type of thing. So, but it does make me feel like I'm very, very connected with what the American homeowner wants now, and everything. So great to be a part of this webinar, and look forward to participating right through the whole entire session.
Well, I appreciate that, Danny. It sounds like we are going to get a lot of great insight from you, and I'll catch you for that phone number after the session.
Okay, all right.
Next up, we have Dave King, the Executive Director of the Home Improvement Research Institute. HIRI is the industry association trusted by home improvement leaders across North America. Dave, welcome. Please share a little bit about what led your path to home improvement.
Yeah, so I've been in the research, strategy, advanced analytics space for the last 25 years, but the last 10 years have been fully focused on home improvement. Worked for a great organization, Enerbank, Regions Enerbank. They do home improvement lending. That's where my focus from a research perspective really honed in on home improvement. I've been in the real estate and I'll call it heavy DIY space for almost 20 years now. Got interested in real estate very early, and the initial interest in actually working for Enerbank was just simply a passion and love for the real estate housing space. Joined HIRI back in November of last year. Prior to as the executive director, prior to that was a board member, and prior to that as a regular member. HIRI is such a great organization. We've got a very simple business model. $12,500 annual membership. It gets you $1 million of research each and every year. We do one thing really, really well, and that is survey research of homeowners and pros in their home improvement behaviors. And so I love this dynamic that we have with Eric, Danny, and myself, because we're coming at it all from just slightly different angles that I'm very hopeful is high value to this audience. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here, Dave. We appreciate it. Last but certainly not least, we have Eric Voyer, Vice President at TraQline, the leading authority on home improvement market share. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Stacy, and thanks for the appropriate introduction for my name. You can call me Voyer or Voyer. The actual French-Canadian version is Voyer, so thank you for that. But I appreciate all of you guys out there joining us. As Stacy said, Eric Voyer with TraQline. I have been in consumer insights back before it was called consumer insights. Remember, Dave, we used to be called market researchers, right? So I've been in consumer insights for a pretty long time, about the time that Danny started his first TV show about 25 years ago. My goal is to help clients understand shifts in consumer behavior, shifts in where people are buying products, what they're buying, where they're buying them. We've had this product for the past 20-something years called TraQline, which is a survey of consumers. So it's actually getting information directly from the consumers who buy products from manufacturers and retailers. So it's very actionable, very insightful, and those trends are consistent over time to be able to track what's going up and what's going down. Over the past couple of years, we've started some really new stuff with some really cool new technology. We've got a product called Hybrid Point of Sale that measures actual SKU level shares at the big three retailers for appliances. Incredibly actionable, incredibly accurate, and super awesome stuff. We'll dig into some more of that a little bit later. Our clients are anybody from big retailers to big manufacturers to consultants and manufacturers. Anybody who sells products at or in Home Depot, Lowe's, Best Buy, Walmart, those kinds of customers. Anyway, enough about that. For me, I'm really kind of a passionate home improvement guy, like super hands-on. I was just telling Danny and Dave about the project that I've got building my deck. I love home automation. I love remodeling parts of my house. My wife likes that. She hates it. Her goal is one day use the 2-car garage for a car, right? Mine's really just, I just need a bigger garage. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm really excited about chatting with you guys and giving you some of my perspective as well.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us as well. I'm really excited about our discussion today. As I mentioned, it's pretty casual. We'll have a question answer format. I have put together a list of questions regarding home improvement that will address each of your specializations. So let's go ahead. I think we can all agree it's been an interesting and exciting time for home improvement, right? I'd love to hear from each of you about what you're seeing overall within your respective industries. Eric, you're measuring the consumer behavior for home improvement. What have you seen as the highs and lows over the last year or two?
Yeah, so I'll touch on some top level stuff, and obviously we know what questions are coming, so I'm going to dive into some more of that data as we go through this webinar here. But First off, it's important to define what we define as home improvement. Dave, you alluded to it. We're on the consumer side. You and Danny are Danny's on the pro side, but also buying products for consumers and updating consumers' homes. So we're just focused on the consumer, not on the pro. Any product that you could buy at a big box or a local hardware store are the kinds of products that we track. So that's anything like tools, outdoor power appliances, kitchen and bath. And then we're collecting information from the large retailers to the small retailers, like Wally's World of Woodworking, right? So we might be tracking the products that they're selling there. So I just kind of wanted to set the stage in terms of what we're tracking and what we've got in terms of that data. So for some of the trends that I'm seeing in particular, one of the key things that we've seen is just from the retailer perspective. The big retailers in home improvement, Lowe's, Home Depot, they've got stores on every corner. They are still winning the battle for the consumer dollars in most of the home improvement categories. I'll dig in a little deeper later, also let you know where Amazon and Walmart fit into there. But from a market share perspective, they're the 800-pound gorilla. The pandemic, I know probably a lot of people are sick of hearing that word, but really drove some different trends, in particular online. Those continued to change slightly in 2022. Obviously, from 2019 to 2020, we saw some massive changes. We are still seeing increases in online buying, as you would expect. But one of the questions that we wanted to know is, did they stick? Did those behaviors stick? Because a lot of things changed, and I'll dive into that as well. Finally, on the brand side, endless aisles, right? Marketplace concept, that introduced a lot of different brands into the marketplace. But what we're seeing is that on the brand side, it didn't affect those big brands, the top three, if you will, their ability to gain or hold market share. So when I look at all these guys together as one, only one of the 8 different categories that we track saw decreases in that aggregate share. And it's important to note that we're tracking all those brands and all those retailers, not just some subset of them. Remember, Wally's World of Woodworking. And then finally, prices and prices and prices and prices. We're all feeling the effects of inflation, and home improvement is feeling that as well. And I'll dive into that as well. But definitely some increases in prices for the consumer.
Awesome.
Stacy?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dave, how about you? What trends are you seeing in the HIRI data that are similar or different from what Eric has shared with us just now?
Yeah. So I think right now, and I think for the rest of this year, is going to be one of the most interesting times to be a researcher in the home improvement space, because depending on how certain things play out, it could mean things are positive year over year or negative year over year. There's, I think really high level, some things that just are fascinating me right now that will drive home improvement activity or the lack thereof. There are a lot of people in old homes right now, more so than any time in the past within the US. There are a lot of individuals that bought homes in the pandemic. You know, they were the first one on the door to get that bid in, and they barely won it, and all the contingencies were gone. Now they're in it, and they're like, good golly, there's some things I don't like about this home. So that's going to drive home improvement activity. And then you've got this whole other group of people that are like, 5% is a high interest rate, where historically it's not. But if you're at 2.5%, it's got to really be compelling for you to move. And so these three things, you've got all these people in their homes that are just, they want to improve their homes. And I think there's been some great commentary out there around what the next 10 years look like. And I fully support that by the time we hit 10 years from now, we are going to be so much higher than we are today. Now, in the meantime, 2023, 2024, maybe we're slightly positive, maybe we're slightly negative, but what I think we can all agree on is high inflation does not help. As consumers want to remodel their home, if things are suddenly twice as expensive, and we already know consumers historically drastically underestimate how much they think they're going to spend on a project or even a product. So if inflation exacerbates that issue, it's going to detract some people. A recession, if we have one that's largely felt by the middle class, that's going to negatively impact things. And then, in the pandemic, there was so much DIY I'll call it DIY availability. We were all home, so we could take care of those easier projects that we felt comfortable doing with. Well, we're seeing more and more pressure of organizations pushing people back into the office. And so there's going to be a little less availability to do DIY. And a lot of us did the DIY we're comfortable with, which only leaves the work that requires a pro. So that might help buoy, the pro area. And we'll speak a bit more about that later. But all this is to say that I see very positive, if 5 years ago we were to talk about the forecasted volume of home improvement spend in 2023, everyone I think would be thrilled with what 2023 is going to look like. The negative commentary really might be, well, compared to 2022, well, 2022 and 2021 were pretty weird years. So I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah.
Dave, I love looking at some of that research from HIRI about, consumers, their expected spend and the different types of things and what pros, whether they're going to use a pro or not, whether pros are delaying their job. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of that. I know that, when I go to Costco, I always spend way more than I expect, and home improvement's the exact same thing.
Well, we worked on our kitchen during just, I guess, post-pandemic. And I never added up the final cost because, to your point, I had a budget in what we said we were going to spend, and I know it was much more. But
Stacey, I also know you, and I know that you worked on that kitchen like pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and post-pandemic. It was a major effort. It looks great.
That is a whole nother webinar, but yes, it was.
That's right.
I feel like
That's for Danny to talk about.
Yeah,
contractor issues. Danny.
Great. Danny, what are you seeing that might be different from what Eric and Dave have shared? And what's on your mind as it relates to the industry overall?
Well, I have very similar thoughts, but I kind of take it back to, if you think about 08, 09 and the economic condition, everything there, it wasn't a choice whether or not I wanted to do some things around the house. A lot of people were pushed to do those necessary things. It got them outside their comfort level a little bit. And then I've heard it from many, many people going, you know what? That was empowering. I love doing that. I did the little kitchen, the little foyer with my ceramic. Now I'm doing my whole great room. So it empowered a lot of people out of necessity in doing that work themselves. And, there was a little bit of what we call patch and wait, let's just do a little something, wait for better times. And then when you fast forward to the pandemic, and I know everybody certainly, as Eric mentioned, tired of hearing that word, but it is going to prove, in my opinion, to be something that drove more people to do home improvement than anything else. Because, as Dave mentioned, they were sitting at their house and, this room looked okay, but now I'm sitting in here every day. I want a new color and I want some, better windows. And so it motivates a lot of work that's being done around the home. Certainly the challenges in getting the skilled guys out there also motivates a lot of people to say, I'm gonna try this on my own. The availability of materials and instructional and all of the YouTube things and all of the things on sites like mine at Today's Homeowner, it points you in the right direction and gives you that practical, realistic information. And it's really, to me, has spawned more people interested in doing some of the work themselves or hiring it done, or a hybrid of both, which we're seeing a lot of that. I tried that. I don't like that. I'm going to hire that out. But there's a lot of opportunities there, and we're seeing that. It's fueling the fire in what has happened over the last few years, and I'm glad to see it. I mean, it's making our numbers go way up with our viewership and readership and so forth. So it's obvious that more people are doing that than ever before. Now, when the economy gets better and we have more available income, maybe they'll slack off on that a little bit and only do the things they really like. But that's one of the trends that I'm seeing as a result of what we've gone through, that there's a higher interest. And certainly some of the stock prices you're seeing in some of the big box stores are pointing to that same type of curve. Now, does it level off? Everybody getting back into the regular routine, does it level off a little bit? It will, in my opinion, a little, but there's still that group of people that have learned what I learned many years ago, that you get such a great gratification from doing these things that I kind of like it. I may do a little bit of that this Saturday because it makes me feel good and I save a little money in the long run. So I think that's a pretty strong thing we will see more and more as the years ahead.
Cool.
Great. That's exciting. And I love that word empowering, right? You feel good when you do complete some of those little projects, even if they are small. So as you guys have all kind of touched on a little bit, the supply chain issues, right? And what they've played in terms of getting product to consumers. Danny, would you say things are good right now, but in terms of what you're hearing from homeowners as it relates to their confidence in moving forward with these larger remodel projects, how is that?
Well, they certainly read everything that we read, and it's a little up and down and backwards. So they really like to get it straight from someone that is doing a lot of the work, that's really, really involved in it. And even though there's a lot of similarities all over the country on the supply and demand issues, there's still certain pockets that are in a lot better shape than others. One of the most positive things I heard the other day, I won't mention the window company that were advertising this, but they were actually advertising how quick they can get your windows from the time you order to the time you get them, or they'll give you a 10% discount. I went, wow, okay, now somebody is using closing that window down as far as the availability as a selling point. That's good all-American competition, and that's only going to help us all in getting more and more people to ratchet up to get these things moving quicker. That's going to run the volume of the overall sales up, but it's also going to motivate more homeowners to get work done. Because I know in talking to my construction guys, there's been some real innovative ways of doing things instead of sitting there waiting on things. Windows, a good example. They had a very large project that they were replacing all of the siding on. And as most of you would know, you're great time to take the windows out, put new windows in, and you tie your trim and your siding back to that. But what if you don't have windows? Are you going to sit there for 6 months waiting on those windows? Not at all. What they did in this particular case, very carefully measured how much the trim was going to be. They made a mark where the siding was going to be. They ran the siding on the entire house without taking any of the old windows out. Everybody was happy. It moved forward. The painters were able to move forward. Then they came back after the windows were there, taking one out at a time, putting it in, trimming it out, and painting that one area. It was very successful. It didn't really justify, or create a lot of extra work. And it worked very, very well. So that innovative thinking and how you can get past that part of it is very important. What you don't want to do is to tear out all those kitchen cabinets and then wait for 6 months. People get a little aggravated at eating those peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for 6 months. So have that timeline tightened up a good bit, but it has changed the way we're thinking of things. But I see a quick correction happening right now. And again, that little commercial that I heard the other day was pretty encouraging in that way.
That's great to hear. Really innovative thinking outside the box to a whole new level, right? Dave, so we heard a little bit from Danny, obviously, on consumers' confidence about moving forward with some of these projects. Are you seeing the same thing in terms of projects from the HIRI data?
Yeah, well, so I want to tie into what Danny said. It's amazing just how much supply chain can impact home improvement behaviors. The last time I ordered windows, it was 8 months, and you certainly don't want to have an open house waiting for those windows. And so, if I may just briefly talk kind of what I'm seeing on the pro side, specific to tie in with Danny's comments, which is, pre-pandemic, I feel like the contractor base is a pretty loyal base. It's always a tough kind of nut to crack and understand of how do you maximize that loyalty. But what we know is when from HIRI research is that as availability became an issue, one, it certainly drove up pricing on the labor side and on the material side. But our pros, they really had to get material to keep working. Otherwise, they got people standing around, and you got to pay those people. And if you don't, then they're leaving. And that's already an issue for pros throughout the pandemic. And so what we found is that loyalty was challenged significantly. And the same happened on the consumer side. You might have had a favorite brand or a favorite product, and you couldn't get it, or you couldn't get it easily, or whatever it might be. And so from our research, we found overwhelmingly homeowners and pros had very positive experiences with switching. Now, that doesn't mean there wasn't switching pains, but overwhelmingly, people that switched a brand, a product, or a supplier when they evaluated that new brand, the new supplier, the new product, very positive ratings. And so it's a very interesting time right now, again, to be in the research space because, is loyalty dead? I don't think so. And I think there's some elements, on the pro side where our manufacturers and retailers really need to get creative of how to encourage loyalty and how to address the pricing concerns, which I'll talk a bit more about later. Thank you.
You did jump ahead a little bit on that loyalty, but that is fine. I wanted to add to that because I definitely think that it's your consumer mindset, right? Like for me, I deviated from my brands and retailers, right? Because of the circumstance, and it became about need. And so I couldn't get the product that I always bought in the brand or from the retailer that I always purchased. So I did have to try new things. And I definitely think that I was having much better experiences than I had expected I would, for sure.
If I might just add one more point that I think is really, I think hopeful, or I'm hopeful is helpful, which is, HIRI puts a 5-year forecast out there by building product category. And as we look at the next 5 years, what we see is 23 and 24 from a consumer side. Growth rates are very small, sub 1%. And there are some really great research organizations coming out with their own forecasts that will be slightly negative to slightly positive as well. All of us are, depending on what metrics we're using for the models we're building, are going to be slightly negative or slightly positive, more or less. Where I think there is uniform agreement on the consumer side is that it's going to differ quite a bit by building product. And there's a lot of different things impacting, what categories of building products or projects are going to do really well over the next year versus not. But overwhelmingly, I think most people are poised for very moderate growth or decline over the next 2 years, and then a rebound. And if we get interest rates below 5%, I mean, we're just going to light a fire like we did in the past, and people are going to be like, oh, how is this possible? It's happening again. But my own personal opinion is if rates really were to come down, let's say in response to a bigger recession, it would just light the fire under home improvement again.
It is a big if.
Yeah, that's exciting opportunities ahead. Hopeful for that, and I'm sure everyone that's listening is hopeful as well. Yeah. So Eric, Dave mentioned, a little bit of the moderate spending slowing down. What is TraQline's channel data telling you about where people are actually spending their home improvement dollars and investing in home improvement?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've found really interesting is thinking specifically about the retailers and brick and mortar versus online. And I think one of the key trends that we saw, as I keep mentioning, is this change in online shopping, online purchasing behavior during 2020 and 2021. Let's use that instead of that other word that nobody wants to hear anymore. So if I look at just that change in patterns, and generally with home improvement, you saw, 2018, 2019, 17, 18% of the units for all these home improvement categories were purchased online. But when we get to 2020, it jumps up to 26%, right? So just 1 year, we went like this, right? So then the question that we kept asking ourselves is that trend going to continue? Is it going to continue to accelerate? Is it going to decelerate? Like, is it going to lose momentum? And what we found is that it really didn't. Like, it didn't accelerate. In fact, if we look at what happened between 2020 and 2021, it went up by like 1 percentage point. So that was that was 25 to 26%. And then change in 2022 is 0. So it's still flattened out. So we've got this curve that looks like this, and then it's kind of flattened out at the top. So, that's not to say it's not going to pick back up, this online trend, right? But right now what we're seeing is that it's kind of flattened out for a little bit. And there are a lot of interesting online behaviors in terms of buy online, pick up in store that we can talk about if you'd like. But yeah, let's just look at online gains first. Let's look at which retailers are winning online. As I said, it's kind of leveled out a little bit at about a quarter of the market, but the greatest share changes in the past 5 years are really coming from Home Depot in the big box space. 3% overall market share gains. Doesn't sound like much, but when you look at the size from Dave's Dave's data about the size of home improvement, 3% is a huge chunk, right? Then when we look at Lowe's and Amazon, each of those guys actually gained 2 percentage points in the past 5 years. So again, a pretty decent chunk. But what that means is that they're taking it from somebody, right? So who are they taking it from? Well, some of these smaller guys. So the independent stores. I'll use somebody other than Wally's World of Woodwork. How about Chuck's Appliances, right? So they're taking data, taking market share from them. You know, when we look at Walmart, they're a fairly minor home improvement retailer. This is still online. They did that investment in Walmart Plus, right? They've got around a 5% market share. Around 2020, 2021, they started to gain a little bit of share, probably because of those investments. And now they've dropped back down in 2022 below 5%. One interesting thing that I keep finding is Costco in the home improvement space. We put major appliances in home improvement. Not everybody does that. But Stacy, I think for your kitchen remodel, it was a major home improvement, right? So we think of appliances as a home improvement product, and Costco's done a really good job in major appliances online in that space. But when you look at the overall home improvement, they're not really a player. Is that a sign for things to come? I don't know. When we look at brick only, I'll be a little more terse here. Home improvement or Home Depot had the biggest share gains, about 4 percentage points over the past 5 years. So a bigger gain than on the online side. Lowe's, second highest, about 2.5 percentage points in terms of market share. And then everybody else is really just kind of trading share back and forth. So, you know, one year, one person is up by 0.5 percentage point, and other years they're down. So just kind of trading back and forth. So that's kind of the overall perspective of online, brick and mortar, which retailers are winning and which ones are losing.
Awesome. I have a couple of follow-up questions, if that's okay.
Nope.
So for me, the shift that the word we're not talking about brought was flexibility and time-saving means of getting our products at our house.
Yeah.
So I definitely have switched to curbside pickup. For me, that's primarily what I do. I have 3 kids and it's crazy and I don't have a lot of time. And I think that was a huge win for retailers, obviously, but are you seeing, you kind of started to touch on it, are you seeing consumers getting back into the stores?
So yes and no. So what's interesting is if we look at, we ask, how did you get this product, right? Did you buy it online, pick it up in store? Did you have it shipped to your home? Did you get it some other way, which I don't know, fell off the back of a truck? I'm not sure what that means. But, so we ask them that question. And when I look at this buy online, pick up in store, it was kind of a really hot thing for a minute, right? It was like, drive in, sit in your truck, you wear your little mask, you don't have to talk to anybody. And like for me, I have a truck, sit in your car, they just throw it in the back, like I'm completely contact free. So that really took off. And then post-pandemic, it's kind of fallen off a cliff. Like we haven't seen quite as much lift from that as we would expect. In addition to that, when they do go to pick it up in the store, we're actually seeing a decrease in the number of people that go sit in that parking spot. So They go to the store, and then they park, and then they walk into the service desk and they just pick it up. I don't know why that is. Are they tired of waiting? Are they in their car? I don't know. Maybe they just are eager for human contact. Yeah. Not sure. But we are seeing also, because of a lot of the investment in this infrastructure at some of these retailers, actually shipping the product to your home. We're seeing that pick up. So across the board. And that's not surprising. Like, why go out when I can get it shipped? So this combination of online purchases going up and then the infrastructure, I can get it quick. I bought a product from one major online retailer that sells a lot of things, including books. It was delivered the next day. I bought another one from a home improvement retailer, and it was also delivered the next day. And that didn't used to happen. So Those are some of the changes that we're seeing there with the convenience aspect.
For sure, retailers becoming more nimble. Sorry, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. Like, I love what you just said, Eric, because I think we'd all probably agree with this just intuitively, that one of the real benefits of the pandemic is this convenience the way you want it.
Yes.
And we're all just simply better served by, if you want to go in store, you go in store. You want to have it delivered to your truck, great. And it just bodes so well for the industry, because as people have positive experiences with those they need to interact with on home improvement, it just encourages more of it. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, great point.
That you guys have over there.
And I think certainly on the pro side, you're seeing the more savvy professionals that are trying to save time. I never understood seeing contractors walking around the aisles of the big box store, buying this and buying that. I never had that time or patience to do that when I was out there swinging a hammer. So being able to be savvy enough to save a lot of that time from that standpoint, whether they're going through the delivery cycle or picking it up on curb, is great. I mean, I think more and more, and the statistics are showing more contractors are embracing that than they have before. Only makes sense.
Yeah.
And again, Danny, that could have something to do with infrastructure, right? Like if you're sitting at a job site waiting on somebody to show up, you can get on your phone and you can do your entire order for the next day or the next month or the next week while you're waiting on that to happen. And that's both technology and infrastructure for these guys. And yeah, I mean, like, it's awesome to get to the store and all your stuff's loaded on a pallet, right? And then they just, it's great.
Oh yeah, no doubt. It's a big savings, and a lot more people are embracing it. You see it all the time now. As a observer of the big box stores, there's a lot more contractors in those aisles than ever before.
Yeah.
One last question, Eric. Back to the online versus brick and mortar. Have you seen a shift in pricing? What's the pricing differentiation between those two channels?
So in general, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, right? Prices have gone up, right? We all know that. I mean, have you bought a loaf of bread, right? Or butter or milk, right? It's painful. It seems like every week I walk in, it's 50 cents more for bread. So there's not really a magic formula on which categories win online versus brick. You know, in general, as I mentioned, the retail prices are higher. It doesn't surprise me that retail prices in general are higher. You know, it's more hands-on. There's less opportunity for, I keep saying endless aisle. For those of you that don't know what that means, it means that somebody who owns a website can put 1 million products on that site. They don't have to physically stock them. Whereas when you walk into a physical store, you've only got so much shelf space. So the endless aisle is basically 1 million things. And that gives more opportunities for opening price points, right? So it doesn't surprise me that retail prices are higher. But getting to the meat of your question, products that have a higher retail price, a price at retail, kitchen and bath, building, rough supplies, so that's like, you know, lumber, drywall, molding, and major appliances, higher price at retail. When we look at higher prices online, power tools, hand tools, lawn and garden, and small appliances.
Interesting. My hypothesis would have been that people would pay more online for the convenience factor. So that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Dave, we know you've talked a lot about, you know, 2020 impacting consumers, but I know HIRI has a lot of interesting information about the home improvement professional. Can you dive into that a little bit more about how the pro behavior changed following the pandemic and how or what retailers must do to meet their needs in this new normal?
Yeah, so I spoke a little bit about it earlier, just wanting to tie into with Danny's comments. So I'll be real brief here. Price is the new issue where it was availability of the last couple of years. Recessionary pressures, inflationary pressures, price is simply going to come up a lot more relative to, are you simply available to do the work or do you have the product? To our manufacturers and suppliers, I would reiterate the earlier point, which is get creative, get very thoughtful around how you can encourage loyalty. Bring them back. It's a loyal group. How do you bring them back to a state of being loyal? And two, how can you help your customer, the pro, resolve the pricing pressure that they're going to be increasingly feeling? And that is in our data. And you know, one of the exciting things about today's timing, we have 3 projects where we finished data collection, done some initial data analysis, but the final deliverable hasn't been published. And so we've got some really this month data that suggests that this pricing thing is becoming more and more of an issue across a large swath of questions. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Let's see, I'm skimming through my questions just because I know we've covered some of these and I don't want to go back and repeat everything. let's see. Danny, you spoke a little bit about the supply chain and issues and securing materials and thinking out of the box. And you gave a couple examples with the windows and the siding. But what are the other big issues that you're seeing that in terms of securing those materials? What seems to be holding up some of these projects besides building material?
There's still some ones, especially if you're talking about going in and significantly removing a kitchen, the center of family life. You need to know when those cabinets are coming and the appliances and so forth. And it's strange, appliances have been one of the biggest lead times that a lot of contractors have had to deal with. But we're seeing more and more creative ways of doing the first phase. The first phase that allows you to do a portion of the work without inconveniencing the homeowner, because the homeowners, they want to do something. Once they decide that they're wanting the project, they want to get it started as soon as possible. And if you're careful with it and you're able to do a certain part of it and stop while you're waiting on something without the inconvenience, we're seeing more and more of that than ever before. I know there's a door unit that the guys are waiting on. They've been waiting on for several months, probably 7 months. But they were able to finish every single thing else. The door came in, one day they were done. So you got to be a little more creative, and certainly that is incumbent upon the contractor to explain the process thoroughly to the homeowners that, hey, we're in kind of unprecedented times right now. We're having to do this. You might not have that dishwasher for a month. Is that okay? And at that point, usually, somebody will say, no problem, let's move forward if we can get everything else done. So it has changed a little bit about the critical path of construction in many situations, but fortunately, as I mentioned earlier, it's getting a lot better right now.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Dave, you touched a little bit on projects earlier, but would you mind sharing a few more trends in terms of what you're seeing in regard to project overall?
Yeah, and for the sake of time, I'm going to combine kind of the two questions that are left here, just to be brief. But there's some really fascinating dynamics when we look at like consumer income from real terms, i.e., in inflation-adjusted terms, and we look at savings rates. Saving rates are coming down. Amount in savings is coming down. Real income is coming down. All of these things, puts downward pressure on discretionary spend. And we know from our research that discretionary spend, when that goes down, it impacts home improvement. Now, there's the resilient aspect of repair and maintenance, which usually is going to be a lot more resilient when discretionary income goes down. But those enhancements to your home are most likely to be impacted. It is shocking to me, based on how I was thinking of the consumer, that we haven't seen a bigger drop. In fact, we've seen quite the opposite, where we ask consumers, homeowners, how good of a time is it to do a project up to $5,000? And 44% as of April, 44% say it's a great time or a good time to do home improvement under 5K. If you add in those that say, it's neutral, then we're talking over 2/3 are feeling it's a great time or a good time to do it. Where it changes a little bit is when you go to projects over $5,000. Then the number drops from nearly half to 1 in 4. 24% think it's a good time to do a project over 5K, and a similar percent, 27%, feel like it's a good time to hire a pro. And so there's just these dynamics that are so fascinating right now, where we're really seeing the resiliency of home improvement, but there's cracks in the foundation, right? Like we know backlogs are coming down from surveying our pros. 3 months was pretty common 6 months ago. Now we're closer to kind of 1 to 2 months being more of the norm. And Danny, interested to hear kind of what your perspective on that as well. There's also this other element that really, I think, throws a wrench into plans in trying to understand this, which is, back in 07, 08, and the recovery coming out, we talked about a K-shaped recovery. There's those that are doing really well, and there's those that really aren't doing well. And I'm really curious, as it relates to home improvement, will we have this separation of the haves and the have-nots, where the haves, availability, material, labor, it's easier, less pricing issues, so it's a great time to do it, versus those that are more worried about keeping their job and might have a month worth of saving rather than a year. And so suddenly that group's pulling back. And so really who you talk to is really going to change the perspective on what's home improvement outlook. Thank you.
Guys, we have exceeded our time. Went better than I thought in terms of conversation and sharing information. I do want to leave a couple of things. Are there any other comments that you would like to share? I know one thing we kind of touched on was loyalty, right? Like, I think that's a big thing to understand as the shopping landscape has changed. And Dave spoke a little bit of loyalty. I touched on loyalty. Eric, is there anything that you have in terms of, loyalty that you would be able to share from the TraQline data about, are there certain brands in home improvement that people are focused on as being more loyal to?
Right. So again, in the interest of time, I've got, 17 different paragraphs that describe all this, but I'm just going to kind of hit on two key things that we've seen. When we look at private label for some retailers, it tends to be doing very well. For instance, in paint for Home Depot, you see Behr as the leader in paint. And that's their own, the only place you can buy that is at Home Depot. There's some other limited distribution like Craftsman that you're seeing that is doing pretty well in power tools and hand tools and accessories for certain retailers. One of the other things that I think is really interesting is when we talk about product innovation, right? In some cases, the industry is changing very dramatically, in particular with outdoor power equipment. Outdoor power equipment, we're seeing a lot of battery-powered tools that are coming to the market. You've got these big ZTRs, which is the zero-turn mower, where you can either use a steering wheel now, but you see pros on these things. You're seeing those powered by batteries. Ego, Ryobi, MTD, they've been doing innovative battery-powered stuff for years, but now we're seeing brands like DeWalt, John Deere, who are doing some innovations on batteries. We think a lot about small appliances. You got Shark Ninja, Bissell, Dyson, winners there. And then finally in appliances, you've got some real growth in terms of brand share. 1 out of every 4 appliances purchased right now is either an LG or Samsung. Great example, our hybrid POS data shows there's like 1 Samsung model in side-by-sides among the big 3 refrigerators that has a 10% market share. So, I mean, there's individual models that are doing really well in the industry. And when you look at the top 5, there's just a couple of brands that are in there. That model, by the way, somebody's going to ask, I've got it printed out here, RS27 T5200SR. I'll look that one up. But yeah, there's more on the brand side, but I'll forego that and let people ask questions later if they need to about that stuff.
Awesome, thank you.
Selfishly, I've got to ask this of both of you, Danny and Eric, but what is your take on loyalty? Do you think like loyalty has been redefined for the pro? Or do you think we're gonna, are we gonna get back there? I'm hearing it from our members and others in the industry. They just want to know, like, how do we get this loyalty back?
Yeah, a good point, because without a doubt, out of necessity, they've had to go to different sources, and they said, wow, I've never tried this before. I never tried this brand of cabinet or faucet or whatever. I may take that on as well, because builders, when pros do get stuck in a little rut, and they did the same thing. Well, when they're forced to try something different, it opens their eyes a little bit, and I think we're going to see that the loyalty has shifted a little bit here and there. Maybe they come back. I mean, I had a situation recently. I'm not going to mention the name of the appliance, but I have had absolute fits with this particular. I've been in my house for 3 years, and all of these appliances that I've had, they're not the same appliance that they were before. It's been a very frustrating thing, and it made me say, never again will I buy that brand. I'm going to something. I've been loyal to this brand for 30 years. Never again. I'm going over here. It's not the same one. So it's happening to me, and I think that's happening to a lot of people out of necessity and good old common sense.
For sure.
So there's two loyalty components there. One is the supply house or the supplier on the pro side. Did you get it from a lumber yard? Did you get it directly from the manufacturer, right? And then there's the brand side as well. and both of those come into play. So in some cases, your normal supplier doesn't have a specific brand, and so they don't have anything, and so you need to find a new one. And I think a lot of the smaller people took advantage of that during the peak of where it was difficult to find products. But there were a lot that didn't, and they didn't treat their customers well because they weren't prepared to deal with the overload. And I think those that dealt with their customers and addressed their needs, they became successful as a result of it. I also need to mention that my indication of any brands or retailers is not an endorsement in any way, shape, or form of those brands and retailers. Danny, I'm glad you said that. I'm simply stating data. So I think that's important, an important distinction.
You guys have time for a couple of questions. We do have a couple that I think are worth mentioning or would be interesting to share. If you have a minute.
I'm good. Yeah.
Besides the usual kitchen and bath, did we see trends in terms of the rooms that people are improving most often? What are those projects that they're engaging in? I guess that would be, I think all of you probably have some type of data on that, if I'm correct. Who wants to go first? Danny, since you're on the front. Yeah, why don't you tell?
Outdoor living area, has always statistically been way up there. I see no downward turn in that trend at all. Certainly being around your home a lot, and you get tired of being inside, and we always think about here at today's homeowner, your house doesn't end at the back door, it extends out into the yard, and we're just seeing so many people taking on projects, and that goes back to what I call phase remodeling. It's a perfect opportunity for you to have this master plan, know what you want to do with it, and then do a stage at a time so that you're not duplicating efforts and you're moving forward on all of the efforts that you're doing. So certainly I'm seeing a lot of that, and a lot of the popularity of creating those outdoor really fun places. It's about the strongest trend I see, along with the kitchen and bath facelifts.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Dave, do you have any insights from HIRI in terms of where they're focusing their projects?
Yeah, I would say, going into the pandemic and for that real period of time, it was all about increasing effective square footage and multi-purpose use of the square footage. After that, people realized that, hey, this home improvement stuff actually is really nice to have done. And so they started to move towards either things. And if they're more the DIY, then it might be the other bedrooms, the living rooms, paint and flooring, things very easy to do. And what remains are the more expensive, but then on the higher incomes, it's like, hey, it's time for that kitchen refresh. And so it's created for my assessment, a fairly blended mixture of rooms that are being focused on, so that I expect fairly consistent dynamics moving forward based on where in the home work's being done.
Great.
Yeah, and I think if you look into the future, Dave, you gave some great data on what percentage of people think that now is a good, that's not to say they're going to do it, but what percentage of people think now is a good time for a remodeling project under $5,000. That may not necessarily be a full kitchen remodel. So we can it depends on what you're putting in your kitchen, of course. But,
yeah.
So that may give us an indication of what to expect going forward as well, with some of that data that you have in terms of rooms.
Sorry, Dave, you may have touched on this a little bit. Somebody is asking, and I apologize if I've missed it, but talking about shipping directly to those job sites. Can you talk a little bit more about that, how that has increased over the past few years? Do you have any data on that?
We do have data on it, but it's not top of mind as far as how that's shifted over time. So I wouldn't be very good to respond right now.
Okay, well, we can absolutely follow up on that. So those are the big questions that I see that I wanted to touch on.
Cool. Good work, Stacy.
Well, you guys did all the heavy lifting. So just to close it out today, obviously, as we said at the beginning, it's an interesting time for home improvement, and it still continues to be, I think. I kind of see this idea of home improvement as, kind of good for our mental health, right? Making our space more livable, however we define that, whether it's putting in a new deck or updating our flooring or something small like new furniture. I I'm excited for the trends that you guys talked about today, and much more optimistic than I think I had been before. So thank you for sharing your information with us today. It's an exciting time for home improvement. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you. That was fun. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for attending.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank
you.
you.
Take care.